Welcome all of you. So, continuing with different types of EIA methods. I think previously we covered ad hoc method, like there were 3 types of ad hoc method: expert opinion, opinion poll and Delphi method. Then we went to checklist methods. There are 4-5 types of checklist methods, right? Simple, descriptive, scaling weighing and a questionnaire. Now, the drawback of checklist method was there was no, or the ad hoc method was, there was no cause effect relationship between the impact and the activity. So, to overcome that drawback, there is one new method or another method for EIA, that is called as network method. That is what we will be studying in today's lecture, and we will look at different examples where we apply this network method, because there are different ways where these networks can be drawn. So, we will be considering different examples, so that you have some clarity like how to apply network method while doing this preliminary EIA for any proposed project or a proposed activity. So, network method, it integrates cause and effect, or the causes and consequences, and not just it identify causes and consequences. In this case it will be activities and impact, because whenever there is any project it will involve a lot of activity, and all those activities may or may not have impacts on different components of the environment. So, basically it is a cause and effect or cause and consequences which are integrated by network through identifying interrelationships between those causal actions and the impacted environmental factors. So, these arrows which connects A2 to A2 or A1 to different matrices, that those arrows are the interrelationship based links. So, here I am not sure it is A1 or A2, I think. So, as you can see in this diagram, like the factor or the parameter A, it can be either A1 or A2. This is one network link and this is another network link, and then A1 can have its own sub parameters as A11 and A2 can have A21 or A22. So, these are actually, you can say, if it lists down in the form of activities, or let us take in the form of impacts, these can be considered as a primary impact, this can be considered as secondary impacts, and these can be considered as a tertiary impact. So, these 3 levels are given here for primary, secondary and tertiary, but it does not mean that this has to be always restricted to the 3. It can also go for like 4 layer, like 1, 1, 1, 1 also. Okay, there can be multiple layers of these network points. So, this representation in the form of a tree is called as impact tree or a sequence diagram, or sometimes it can be also represented in the form of a flow chart. That is just a matter of representing a network. Okay, it can be represented as an impact tree, a sequence diagram or a flow chart. Whether it is a impact tree or sequence diagram or flow chart, you would see that one step lead to the next step leads to the subsequent step. So, there is a link between each steps. So, similarly, if there are like parallel chains or branches, there would be a link of a subsequent factor with the initial factor. Sometimes those links can be in the form of cause and effect, sometimes those links can be in the form of a sub activity of a bigger activity. Okay. And impact tree is a visual description of linkages which identifies cause and effect linkages. This is another way to represent the network method. So, if you look at this diagram, you have these actions represented by A, the triangular nodes, and the environmental impacts represented by I1, I2, I3, I4. So, there are 2 actions A1 and A2, and there are 4 environmental impacts I1, I2, I3, I4. The size of the node indicates its total degree. So, like activity 1 looks like a bigger activity or a major activity, activity 2 is a slightly smaller activity, but then the impact, in terms of impact, I3 seems to be the biggest concern or bigger environmental impact compared to I1, I2 and I4. I4, I3 looks like similar size, so maybe they are equally important impacts, same as I1 and I2, but the arrows connecting these nodes and the direction of the arrow indicates the relationship between the activity and the impact. So, here you can see A1 has environmental impact I1 and I2, and if I2 is a primary impact which may have some secondary or tertiary impacts also. So, you can see I2 is contributing to I4 and I3, okay. It is having secondary and tertiary impacts, and similarly action A2, it generates only I3 impact, but then I3 can lead to I4, okay. So, this interlinking of activities, impacts and different types of impacts, primary, secondary, tertiary, or and many more sub categories of impacts. These interrelationships between them would be easier to represent using a network method, and that is why network method is helpful to identify the cause effect relationship between the nodes, between the actions and the impacts. The methodology for drawing this network diagrams or the network method of EIA, there are 5 basic steps. The first thing is, once we have a project for which EIA has to be done, you identify project activities and list down all the environmental components that would get impacted by this project. Second, establish primary to secondary to tertiary cause effect linkages, okay. It can be within the activities, it can be within the environmental components. Then once we have this, you develop the network or the impact pathway diagram, or it can be in the form of a flow chart, it can be in the form of a sequence diagram, or it can be in the form of a tree, okay. So, that is a tree diagram, and need not be only 2 branches every time, it can have even 3-4 subsequent branches, okay. So, it depends on the complexity of the problem and the information that we have related to the project. And the fourth one is, once the network diagram is drawn, assess the significance of impact chains. Like if you saw, if you are going to draw something like that, actions and know the triangle and circular diagram, there we need to know the importance or significance of a particular chain. If there are these multiple chains, and if you think this chain is going to have higher environmental impact compared to this, so there may be way to represent this in a more bold line, or you just identify this as a area of more concern. Then propose mitigation and refine the network. Even the mitigation measures can be represented or added into the network EIA method in the form of a network. Let us take before going to examples, these are the advantages and disadvantages of network methods. So, since it integrates cause and effect relationship, the advantage is its integrated assessment instead of discipline by discipline. So, it combines effects, activities and experts and linkages, as well as the significance of those impacts. It links action to impact. It is useful to check second order impacts in a simplified form. In ad hoc and checklist and even in matrix based methods, it will be difficult to identify second order or third order impacts, but network helps us to identify those impacts in a more simplified form. Once it is identified using network method, maybe in matrix method we can go and collect data for that particular impact, but it will be difficult to identify it using matrix method, but it will be easy to identify those second or third order impacts in the network method. It handles direct and indirect impacts. Disadvantages would be, it becomes overly complex. See, when you try to connect a cause effect relationship for any particular activity or project, there may not be a end, or you do not know like where to stop. For example, setting a filter plant, a filtration plant for wastewater treatment. Okay. So, now wastewater treatment plant, if we have it in some city, when the wastewater goes to that plant, it gets treated and clean water comes out. Now, that clean water, it goes to the rivers, then it goes back again to the using points. We do not know where exactly the impact would stop, at what point. Okay. So, if we just keep on linking the cause effect, as long as it goes on extending beyond the basic version, it will become overly complex. So, we should know where to stop and where to set the system boundary while identifying those causes and effects. Then difficult to distinguish and quantify magnitudes of different impacts. Yeah, because network, we do not talk much about magnitude unless we use that triangle and circular representation, but there also if there are multiple impacts, how do we distinguish them and how do we quantify them? It will be difficult if there are so many impacts and so many activities, then having those pictorial shapes of a triangle and circle of different shapes, it will be a very complicated picture to be analyzed with a human eye. If it is in terms of numbers, it is easy to deal with and calculate, but in terms of these pictorial representations, as soon as the number of impacts or the number of activities increase beyond 10 or 20, it will be difficult to have it on a single sheet and to comprehend. It is completely qualitative in nature, that is again a drawback of it. So, let us take one by one different examples for network method. The first one is river channel widening for agricultural purpose. It is a pretty old example from European Commission. So, the three things that you are seeing here is action, primary impact and secondary impact. So, action here is widening of river channel, the channel widening, and it is going to have impact on the geology of the area, soil and the scenery, because already there is a river around which there are farms for which water is required for irrigation, and to ensure smooth access to water, to improve access of river water to fields, the recommendation was to widen the channel of the river. So, when that channel is widened, it is definitely going to affect geology, soil and scenery. So, these are the primary impacts. Now, when the geology or soil or scenery is affected, it can impact some other things which involves agriculture and forestry. Those are called as the secondary impact points, so leisure and creation and housing also. And if you look at these nodes, these dots, it means that scenery affects all three. Soil also affects each of these three secondary impacts, same as the geology. Each of the primary impact is affecting all the secondary impacts. That is what is seen in this picture. Another interesting link here, you can see that geology affects soil and soil affects scenery. Okay. So, there is a interlinkage between the primary impacts themselves also. Okay. Now, can you identify is will I be wrong if I say there can be a interlinkage between the secondary impacts within themselves, because if we have agriculture and forestry, it may affect the leisure and creation activities of the people involved there. It may affect the land available for housing also. Okay. So, you see it is possible to establish a link almost everywhere whenever we have listed down the activity and possible primary and secondary impacts or the environmental components. You can establish a link between each and every factor, and that is what makes this network method bit complicated. So, it has to be done under the guidance of experts, and we should know where it is mattering most to have a link between the impacts or between the action and the impact. Let us take another example, road construction. So, that was a simple network method where you have action, primary impact, secondary impact, you may have tertiary impact. For road construction in forest area, as you can see from the picture also, like forest area will be full of trees, and if you have to construct a road, we will have to cut down some trees, we will have to bring some soil from outside or like use the soil for leveling the land. There will be a lot of heavy machineries moving in the forest area to construct the road. So, it is going to affect land, forest, air, water components of the environment for sure. And forests they have the trees which helps clean the air. So, they will have direct impact on the air, and forest area is cut, that will impact the land also. So, this forest is interlinked with air and land. So, these are the primary impacts on the primary components of the environment. They will have some secondary impacts. On the land, it will be land use change. Earlier, like whatever was the green, lush green land, now there is a road in the middle. So, the use of that land has changed. So, land use change is one impact. In forest, because of this construction activities, some road, it may change the course of movement of some of the animals or species in that area. So, loss of species would be there. It may affect some vegetation also. Then air, if there is a road, there will be a lot of construction, there will be a lot of dust emissions, and when the road is operational, because of the transportation, there will be air pollution, and water would be affected because of hydrological changes, because when you level the ground, you cut down the trees right from their roots. Okay. So, the entire land use change will have some hydrological changes which are related with the water. Then because of land use change, there may be a declining crop yield. Loss of species may lead to decrease in biodiversity. Air pollution may have effect on human health or animals. Hydrological changes may also have effect on humans. It may lead to floods. Okay. So, these are again the subsequent effects of these secondary impacts. So, these are primary, secondary, tertiary. This may have many more impacts. Because of floods, what will happen to property? Property will be damaged, there will be income losses. Because of effect on human health, they will go to the hospitals, again loss of income. Because of decrease in biodiversity, loss of tourism. Okay. Because of declining crop yield, there will be loss of income for farmers. Now, you see, it can go on as long as we wish to take it. Because of income loss of farmers, their living standard would go down. Okay. So, one road construction activity can have a lot of impacts if we go on following this cause effect relationship in the network matrix. But so far as road construction is involved, I think it is important to know where we stop or where we define the boundary of the system within which we have to identify the impacts. Clear? One more example, this is also from a published, I think a book chapter, it is related to mining project. So, mining is a very energy intensive and transportation and people intensive project which has significant impacts and changes in different components of the environment, and they are known to have definitely lot of negative impact on different environmental components. So, this is one way of representing a network EIA method. So, we have this mining project which involves lot of activities. So, this I can call as actions or activities. What are those activities? Site clearance, drilling, blasting. Blasting involves the use of ammonium nitrate explosives, transportation, stockpiling and selling. In site clearance, like because I said earlier, this primary, secondary, tertiary does not go only for the impacts, it can be applicable for activities also. So, now these are the broader activities. Now, in site clearance, some specific activity, sub activity can be cutting down of trees, because if we have to clear the site, we have to cut down the tree or we have to level down the land, earth leveling or land leveling, or it can be something like soil erosion or soil clearance also. So, now all these activities are going to have impact on these components of environment. So, it leads to water pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, employment, flora, fauna and economy. And if you look at the legend, all these black arrows represent the activities, the green arrow represents the positive impact. If you look carefully, positive impact are merged only at the employment and at the economy. That is the purpose of mining industry, to get the minerals, sell it, generate income and add to the economy of the country. And because it is like a big level centralized like industrial projects which involve thousands of manpower. So, it generates lot of employment. So, employment and economy, they are all positively impacted, but rest other components of environment, they are all negatively impacted by each and every activity except for selling. Okay. Do you realize the selling adds to the employment and economy, the selling products, and here since transportation is involved separately. So, in transportation you can see it is leading to air pollution, transportation it is not leading to economy. But again, now it is not possible that transportation won't lead to economy. Okay. If we go in the literal meaning of the word transportation, it can generate employment as well as it can add to the economy. But like I said, we need to know our system boundary. Maybe for that specific mining project in that specific area, based on the observation of the team which conducted EIA, these were the findings. So, it is easy to identify that only the transportation caused only air pollution. The noise pollution was mainly because of this site clearance, drilling and blasting. So, blasting is one of the major cause of noise pollution. Blasting has nothing to do with the flora and fauna. Okay. So, these were maybe the observations for that particular team for EIA project of that particular mining project. So, what I wish to convey here is like it is not universal or the only solution when you do the network based EIA of a particular project. You change the team, it may change to certain extent. You take a mining project in some other area, the things may change. But what is important is learning how to use this network EIA method to represent the findings for EIA report. One last example, since we had covered this bus stop construction shed near the river in all the previous types of EIA methods. So, here I do not have the content on the slide, let us prepare one. So, like when you construct a bus stop shed near the river, what are the activities? The first thing is bus stop construction, right, bus stop shed. Now, what are the components of environment which will be directly impacted? Obviously, air, water because it is near the river, then socio-economic because it is for people. Okay. In terms of air, what will happen? Will there be pollution? Okay. There will be air pollution or there may be some GHG emissions or dust. Now, both of these can be included in air pollution or we can have these two separately. If we want to remove this air pollution part, air will have there will be GHG emissions and dust. From water we can have turbidity increase in water or river contamination, that will be the secondary impact. On socio-economic, it will have reduced, what we say, reduced discomfort for people because they have a now waiting area with the shade to protect them from sun and rain, or here it can be like say either reduced discomfort or the added comfort. And another one, it will lead to economy also, economy increase because more people will prefer to use public transport if the facilities that are related with public transport are developed. So, that way you can draw a network method EIA based diagrammatic representation for any example. So, with this let us summarize. So, we started with the network method, what is the definition, what is the basic representation. You remember it can be represented in the form of an impact tree, sequence diagram and a flow chart. And then we looked at different examples, at least I think we covered 4 examples where we saw different types of networks, like somewhere in most places it was the activities which were categorized as primary, secondary and tertiary, and in some places it was the impacts which were categorized as primary, secondary and tertiary. So, the only important thing is there has to be a link between cause and effect, where cause is basically the activity involved in a project and effect is the impact on a specific component of the environment. So, with that I think we will stop here. Thank you.